So Aries, this week from Le Vampire, you pulled transmission, spreading of conditions, influence, and impact. And then from Chakra Wisdom, you pulled confusion, which the two of them to me is basically saying that there's confusion on who is it that, you're sharing your experience with here when you're looking at transmission. Now, the blessing says you will have someone to travel with on the journey you are undertaking. There will be friendship, laughter, and the sharing of the experience. And then working with this card talks about surrounding yourself with people and ideas that you wish to be influenced by. Create an amazing support network. But I'm basically looking at confusion as to, who is it that you're sharing your experience with here? Now, confusion, the inspiration says, through the willingness to be in confusion, we find clarity. There is nothing to solve. Meditation and quiet time will bring clarity. The personal question says, can I see confusion as a good thing? Can I learn to let go of needing an immediate outcome? And then the key ideas are allowing confusion, for crying out loud, spiritual support, if I could talk right, consequences of actions, and finding love. But again, for me, looking at the two, it's confusion. Confusion as far as who is it that you're spreading these conditions to? If you're going to share your life with somebody, who is that person? All right, Aries, here we go. Here is the energy coming through. You and Pisces, the Five of Cups. And now I can understand why, confusion is there in terms of who you're sharing your life with. The Five of Cups is talking about emotional pain, emotional suffering, feeling like you received less than what you thought you were going to get. And that's one of the things with the Five of Cups. And again, it's because you're looking at the three that are spilled, but not looking at the two that still remain. But again, it's talking about like an emotional blow. Oh my goodness. All right. Now, in the past, the Six of Pentacles. Well, in the past, looking at the Five of Cups, you may have been in a situation or a relationship that may have been one-sided, looking at the Six of Pentacles, because you're talking about needing the equal give and take. But when you're looking at the Five of Cups being the overall, it's saying that it's not there. It's still like being pulled back through here, like still needing to have, that equal give and take, especially within relationships. Now, present conditions, I feel both. I feel both with this. Now, with the King of Staves or the King of Wands. Now, as far as Aries goes, it's talking about despite, the emotional pain that you may be dealing with, it's talking about still feeling confident. But, my other thing, though, too, is if you're dealing with a person here or another fire sign, I have to wonder if, this person is not giving enough to, a relationship here. And this doesn't have to be romantic. This could be family or a work relationship where there just isn't, you receiving what you feel like you need out of the situation or what you feel like you deserve, though, too. But again, as far as your own energy goes, you don't want to, falter, though, on your commitments, though, either. And that's my only problem with the King of Wands. Other than being the man of passion, right? He doesn't really pay attention to detail. But then at the same time, I almost feel like, with the Five of Cups being there, it's like you're wanting to not deal with it, though, either. Which could be good or bad, depending. But I still feel both. I think for some of you, you're going to be dealing with another person here. And again, it could be a fire sign, but, there's still this feeling of needing an equal balance. Oh boy. Now, and that may be where the emotional pain is coming through, especially if you're dealing with a person. When you're looking at the Page of Swords, this is the shit that you don't want to hear. This is the conflict that, is... It's not as bad as the Five of Swords, but it's saying that there is a situation that's surrounded in conflict, unnecessary conflict. But I also feel like that for some of you, you may be hearing something that you don't want to hear from somebody of importance. And again, there's not that equal balance happening. It would have been different had it been anything other than the Five of Cups here. But, I just feel like the communication that's coming through is not what you want to hear. And ultimately, it's creating hurt emotions. Oh, wow. Your best path to follow. The Four of Cups. Now, You know, I can understand emotionally being blah and done with it. You know, the Four of Cups, beyond emotional apathy, though, it's talking about, you know, again, accepting something that isn't what you want. You know, I don't know. I feel like you shouldn't. When you're looking at the Four of Cups, it's one of those feelings where there's got to be something better than this. You know, on the other hand, maybe this is an offer that you don't want. You know, again, like I understand the emotional effect. Absolutely, especially if you're dealing with a situation where there isn't, you know, that equal give and take, right? And you're hearing shit that you don't want to hear. But at the same time, you know, I wouldn't accept anything that's going to make you, you know, continue to feel this way, like you're receiving less than what you thought. You know, you don't want to accept any offers that are not good enough or are not worthy, so to speak. In your environment, the Two of Swords, you're still, you know, needing to make a difficult decision here on whether or not, you know, this is what you really want. You know, the Two of Swords is suggesting, though, that even though you're at a stalemate, right, you know what the situation is. You know the decision that you need to make. It's just whether or not you're willing to make it, especially if you're dealing with a person here that isn't giving you what you need. You know, and there's a need for you to not accept anything that is less than what you should be getting. You know, because you don't want to continue that emotion there of the Five of Cups. You don't want that to be persistent. You know, but I still feel like, you know, you're not really wanting to decide just yet. And it's probably a good thing. You know, it's very rare that I see that, but looking at the Page of Swords coming out, it's probably a good thing that you're not really making a choice. Your hopes and your fears, the Nine of Pentacles. Okay, so if we're talking about work here, right, this may be working for somebody who is, you know, creating conflict for you, not giving you what you deserve. You know, there's a decision on whether or not to just get away from this situation, but ultimately the hope is to be able to continue to, you know, be self-reliant and independent when you're looking at the Nine of Pentacles, beyond being able to enjoy the finer things in life, right? And that may be where the difficulty is coming through, especially if you're dealing with a person that's just creating more emotional garbage for you than anything else. You know, is this a situation that I continue to deal with? And if you do, you know, the Page of Swords is suggesting that there's going to be, you know, things happening that you don't want to deal with, or things being said that you don't want to hear. You know, and I still feel like you shouldn't accept anything that is less than what you deserve. Oh yeah, look at it. Yep. And then coming out of this, justice, fairness and balance, needing fairness and balance, needing to have wrongs amended here. Ooh, and then the Nine of Swords. Okay, so basically what I'm looking at here is, first of all, when you're talking about needing fairness and balance in the Nine of Cups, right, you're talking about wish fulfillment, happiness, emotional fulfillment, and abundance. The problem is are you still going to be happy when you finally get what you want? You know, I don't think that, I don't know, I feel like for some of you, it's unrealistic to expect that, you know, there's going to be any, like, correction happening here, even though this is what you're wanting, right? And the reason why I say that is because of the Tower and the Nine of Swords. You know, unfortunately, this may be a situation here that just has to come to an end. You know, and again, that's where the difficulty in the decision is, right? The Tower is clearing out all of those things that, you know, are no longer serving you. But what I'm looking at is a fear based on, you know, your stability, looking at the Nine of Pentacles. You know, I worry that for some of you, you're not making a decision that you need to make because you're worried about where it's going to leave you, you know, in terms of security and finances. But the Nine of Swords to me is saying that, you know, if you don't make a decision here, you're going to be left continuing to deal with conflict and things that you don't want to hear, you know, and you may end up regretting not making a choice, because even not making a choice is making a choice, you know. But I worry a little bit with the Nine of Cups and seeing justice, and then continuing to see this issue with the Page of Swords, you know. And I just think that, you know, there is something better. There is something better. And that, again, goes back to the feeling here of transmission and confusion. Confusion on whether or not maybe this is somebody that you want to share an experience with. If there's going to continue to be imbalances or unfairness happening, But ultimately, if you don't make a choice, you're still left with the Nine of Swords. I feel like if you do or you don't, there's still going to be that mental and emotional backing to what is happening, unfortunately. This one's a little bit difficult. All right, we're going to take a look at the soul truths to see what other messages there are. And again, this doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. This could be work or this could be family. Speak your truth, risk, and inner voice. And I understand, there's a risk being taken in whatever decision that you choose to make. But speaking your truth, right, you can't be at the stalemate. You got to say something, but your inner voice is ultimately going to guide you in the direction that you need to go, right? If your inner voice is telling you that, it's pointless in continuing this nonsense, then, you might have to take that risk here and make that tough choice, especially if you feel like you're not receiving what you need out of a situation. But always speak your truth. Always speak your truth. All right, Aries, we're going to take a look at the romance angels to see what is going on in terms of relationships for you guys. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much, hon. Keep an open mind. Your soulmate may differ from your usual type and expectations. So, for some of you, when it comes to relationships, your friends are going to be the ones that are going to help you out here. And there is a need to keep an open mind in terms of, your soulmate type, right? But, as far as relationships go, especially if you're coming out of something that's difficult or making the choice to do so, right? Your friends are going to be your support system, and they may be introducing you to somebody else. Now, in terms of those of you who are happy in a relationship, right, just needing to keep an open mind as far as, getting to know the more difficult sides of a relationship, right? And needing to keep that open mind. But again, your friends are going to be your support system. But Aries, I'm telling you, I feel like with the Four of Cups being here, there's a need to really look at, what is going on here. Because otherwise it's just going to leave you numb. And again, don't accept any offers that are less than what you deserve. Because there is something better, definitely, than the Page of Swords coming out on this.